Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is BLLA's, the Boutique Hotels Crisis Guide to Design and Architecture. I am Ariella Karagian, the co-founder of Stay Boutique and the Chief Operating Officer of BLLA. We are so grateful to everyone who has registered for this webinar. We have 550 registrants for today's session. We are going to be focusing on design and architecture of what's happening amid this crisis. Also, at the moment, all articles will be published on stay-boutique.com. It's a resource hub for all boutique hotels and all boutique businesses around the world. And also, please use these hashtags, hashtag Boutique Strong and hashtag Save Boutique Hotels. These are going to be hashtags to bring awareness about the struggle that boutique hotels and businesses are having and to train the traveler in how they can support their favorite hotels globally. Today we are joined by three people who I personally have known for a long time. They're amazing leaders, very, very long-time supporters of BLLA, our initiatives in helping boutique hotels globally. We have Andrew Fay, president of the Gettys Group, Tom Ito, the principal of Gensler, and Amy Jakubowski, the founder of AEG Creative. Amy, off to you.
Hi, thank you, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I've known Tom and Andrew for many, many years as well. And we're here to talk about a crisis guide to design and architecture. Let me just get right off. I mean, it's very unprecedented time. So let me just ask Tom and Andrew, how have you, from your side, seen the industry come together? Sorry, I wasn't Did you want to introduce yourself? I just assumed everybody else knows you.
Yeah. Tom, why don't you lead off?
Lead off and then lead off with who you are and then tell us how you've seen the industry come together.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Okay, I'd be happy to do that, to launch this seminar. I'm Tom Ito. I'm a principal of Gensler, and I've been working in the hospitality industry for now over 25 years. Started with the renovation of Beverly Hills Hotel, and actually that was really built on a down cycle. So there is something about building a down cycle, and when it came out at a really good time. So then I started to develop the practice into a global platform. I just want to say that I'm so fortunate to work with a talented group of people around the globe, around our 6 regions. I want to do a shout out to them if they're listening, and that's me. In terms of how I see the industry coming together, this is a really interesting time because I do think the hotel companies are trying to support what's happening through this COVID-19 epidemic. And we've seen this move towards transitioning hotels into safe centers for workers, for first responders, and to be really a place to offset the needs that we need for the health workers today. And I think the hotel companies are rallying around that. In LA alone, working with the government and the mayor, they've just announced 10,000 guest rooms will be turned over to 115 hotels. That's 25% of the hotels in LA that are going to be converted to this use. And I think that we're seeing that in many cities. Chicago is doing the same thing, and there's a really big rally to really help us through this epidemic or this pandemic that we're doing right now. So in a sense, that's really bringing our community together and really helping to support kind of what's happening. Because in the long run, it's all about kind of what are we going to do to enliven our cities, right? To make our cities livable and healthy and be back to the living places that it wants to be to support how we live, work, and play together. So I think the industry is really doing its share to help us through this crisis. I also think that the industry is really rallying around their people and their employees. As we all know, the staff and how a hotel is serviced is really the heart of a hotel. It's who do you interact and who do you engage with. So those people need to be retain as much as possible. So a lot of the hotel companies are really looking to furlough programs and really trying to way to support them through this so that they want to be there on the other side, because the hotels will come back, and when they do, they want to have that staff, that ambassador, the doorman, the person that you relate to over there ready when the doors open. So there's a big support and rallying about putting their people at their forefront as well.
Andrew, out of four of us that you see on the screen, Andrew is coming live from Michigan. The rest of us are here in LA. So tell us, introduce yourself a bit, Andrew, and then tell us how you're seeing things come together. And are there any particular differences that you're seeing in the Midwest as the coronavirus kind of trickles into your region?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Before I get into that, I'd just like to say hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. And thanks to Francis and Ariella and the BLLA team for convening this forum. And thanks for all that you do for the boutique lodging world. Excuse my hat, like everybody, I have been isolating for the last couple of weeks and didn't want to subject you to my new look. As far as the Gettys group goes, we're a hospitality-focused collective of companies that we're in the interior design, branding, and procurement and development business, and we've been at it for more than 30 years or so in the US and also all around the world, and currently probably working on about 50 or 60 active projects. And within that project load, that also includes 4 hotels that we are the co-developer of in the US. And I'm pleased to report that all of those developments are still under construction today as we speak.
That's great news.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. And fingers crossed that will continue to be the case. I mean, this is obviously an extremely difficult time for everybody. There's all sorts of fear and anxiety in our organizations and in our communities as we all struggle to deal with the effects of this COVID-19 virus and the impact that it's having on our personal and professional lives. And as a result of that, as Tom alluded to, a lot of very difficult decisions are being made by companies which are inevitably imposing hardship on team members and their families. And so I just wanted to make sure that I had a chance to say that. And then the concept of empathy and kindness, human kindness and hospitality is of paramount importance as we continue through this crisis. And on the bright side, in terms of how the industry has been coming together, our industry, particularly the hospitality industry, I think it's fair to say, unlike any other industry, has been basically turned upside down. We've clearly never seen anything like this before. And, just to frame it in the context of a couple of statistics, the World Travel Organization is predicting that the global travel and tourism industry in aggregate will take a hit of around $500 billion globally this year. And then obviously that has significant impact on us domestically in the US, where revenues per available room are down at least 80% year to date. Airlines globally cut about 20 million seats out of their operating capacity last week. And clearly this has a profound impact on employment, because 1 in 10 jobs around the world are related to the hospitality, travel, and tourism business. So based on all that, I think it's pretty clear to say that we are going to be changed forever. And the big question that we're all grappling with is, what is the new normal for hospitality? How will we eat? How will we meet? How will we greet? How will we celebrate in the future? And, we don't have the answers today. Only time will tell where that actually ends up. And in terms of the community coming together, wow, what an incredible community we have. I have spent the last week or two talking to owners and operators and developers and our clients, our bankers, our attorneys, our accountants, our competitors, our peers in the industry. And without fail, I can say every single person has been so incredibly supportive, willing to share information, tips, tricks, advice, assistance. We're all in this together. And it's just so heartening to see the kindness and generosity in our broader hospitality community. I also feel like every day does feel like there is a new crisis that we have to contend with. And so we're starting to see some green shoots. So hopefully there is light at the end of the tunnel.
I think that there is, Andrew. Thank you for that. And you know, we do see things change every day, but I will tell you, and even just the last week alone, I know we've been cooped up for 2 weeks, and it hasn't taken long for our industry to find new ways to communicate. And as we go through crisis, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel, and learning new things from our peers. We have time to talk to one another now. And I've been on more webinars like this, and I've learned so much from our peers, and we have so much to give. And with that, I'm going to ask the both of you, what kind of innovation are you seeing from this? I mean, we're seeing a lot of learning happening, but what kind of innovation have you seen? And what do you think is to come?
Well, you know, I think this whole notion of health and wellness is going to be in the forefront. Obviously, everybody is concerned about their health and their safety. And I think we've seen a lot of innovations come out of crisis situations. You know, when the SARS outbreak happened, you know, the airports implemented infrared fever screening systems, right? The IFSS screening system, so that they can actually monitor that. So we may see that type of screening or providing safe zones before one enters in a hotel, because I think we have to start to get the trust back and the confidence back to our guests as they come back. And I think we're going to see a lot of those types of services and those types of products come into line. I think, you know, how we get refreshed and sanitized before going into different parts of public space, you know, learning from our airport practice. You know, they're looking at safe zones. So how can we actually create safe zones? So when you go through the safe zone, you're actually cleared and sanitized, and you've been tested. And if you are you know, sick or something, then you can get pulled aside and isolated and so forth. But really screening that process so that when you're in, you're amongst people that you feel safer and more confident to be with. So I do think that there is going to be a lot of innovation coming out of it. We've talked a lot about antimicrobial products that are already in the market. So I think we're going to see a bigger push into those surfaces and how they're going to be specified, you know, because I think those products, although we're doing a lot now, I think we're going to see a lot more of that type of product moving forward. Air changers, wellness rooms, all the like. And I think that all that's going to spur a lot of different types of products and ways to move forward, so that the guests will feel more confident and really trust the spaces that they'll be living in.
Andrew, you had some interesting thoughts when we did our practice session yesterday. We have been spending, the last decade making social zones in lobbies and public spaces. What do you think a crisis of this nature is going to ultimately do into our design process there?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I certainly don't have the answer, but there's all sorts of things that we've been mulling over in our offices. You know, this concept of social distancing, which we've all become very, very familiar with recently. I mean, I'm not sure what that ultimately means for public spaces. If we have to implement social distancing standards in public spaces and restaurants and other areas of hotels, I mean, clearly in a restaurant, we probably eliminate 50% of our seating capacity and also 50% of our revenues and the profits that are associated with that. Social distancing in travel may become an interesting concept too. Maybe airlines will no longer be able to sell the middle seating coach, you know, which could be a big relief for some people, of course, but again, has significant revenue impact in the travel and tourism sector. And I think to Tom's point, I think guest rooms may well take on a new look and a new feel and may have more functionality. I think getting rid of everything extraneous in the guest room in terms of surface, so all those decorative pillows or magazines or things that are in guest rooms, people may not want to have around. But also the concept of adding some wellness and health elements to guest rooms may well be more appropriate in the future, because people may not be as comfortable or feeling safe and secure going to public gyms and those kind of facilities in hotels. Maybe even some more commercial elements. Maybe we'll end up with 2 screens in our hotel guest rooms now, so that people can actually work more efficiently and digitally connect, just as many of them have 2 screens in their offices. And public area usage also, I don't know. I mean, one of the things that has been highlighted by the crisis clearly is, the lack of hospital facilities that we have in the country to deal with a pandemic of this order. And certainly maybe some of those certainly non-invasive medical procedures could migrate to hotel facilities, just as we're seeing hotels play an important role of providing safe harbor in some of our big cities right now. So I think it's all up for grabs. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's all going to have a material impact on planning and programming what actually ends up in hotels. And, from an owner, operator, developer standpoint, how do you underwrite those pro formas, and what does that mean in terms of profits at the end of the day to keep the business going?
Exactly. And are we designing rooms big enough for the Peloton bike? So now that we've all gotten used to working out virtually the last couple of weeks, you can almost see the public gym becoming part of the guest room.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
In a lot of ways. Let's see, the isolation, but to that note, like now we're bringing it inwards, right? We're going to create safe zones. We're going to tie ourselves to the guest room. But at the end of the day, it's still human nature to want to connect with people. And we're all kind of stepping up to the plate and doing what we need to do to be home, isolate, communicate with one another like this, which is fantastic that we have the technology to do that now. But what happens after? Do we really want to stay isolated? Do you really think that it's going to have an overall impact and we have to rethink all of that? That's for either one of you to jump in.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think we talked about this before. I mean, we're human beings, and we're built to interact. We're built to socialize, and we've been so digitally focused over the past all the years because of the mobile device, right? That we've been in a way isolating ourselves. So hotels are really a place for people want to come to socialize and be with other people. So I don't think that's going to go away. I think it's just a human nature to want to connect. I mean, I just think of all of us have been isolated. I mean, we've been home now for 3 weeks, I'm just trying to hug somebody right now, and right now I can't even hug. I can't shake a hand, get an elbow. I want to hug. And so when this is over, I got to think. I think we're going to be hopefully closer. But I do think that that we're going to have to take a look at what social distancing really means. What does that mean in a social setting? So I think that there are going to be some changes in the way occupancies are done and areas per square feet, and I think maybe we're going to see occupancies a lot less in the public and social spaces. But I do think that there is a need for us to connect. We may just have to connect in a much different way. Those communal tables may not be so communal after all. We're putting them in every hotel, They have to be really big right now. So, I think there may be a way that we're going to be communicating much differently, but certainly the interaction is definitely going to be there. And we are just collaborative. And that's my personal view, that we're collaborative by nature. So I think hopefully this will not be an isolation, that everybody's going to be stuck in their guest rooms forever because they don't want to go out and see anybody. I'm hoping that there will be more play in the guest room, but I also think that there's going to be opportunities for really to create social spaces with an eye towards social distancing and an eye towards health, and being safe.
Andrew, did you have anything you wanted to add on that, or?
No, I mean, I would agree definitely with everything that Tom has said. And, as we think about meetings business, maybe people will meet differently. Instead of sending 50 people to the meeting, maybe you'll send 5 or 10, and the other 40 will connect digitally. So there'll be that human interaction and connection amongst the group that's together, and then others will join using different forums. And I think the boutique sector in particular has done a really amazing job at creating moments of human interaction, and probably are really the leaders in the hospitality sector for doing that. And I think it's incumbent upon the boutique sector to really focus on that going forward and figuring out how we can do that human to human, personally, but then also I think embellishing that digitally will be part of the program.
We talked a little bit about that, and some of the smaller hotels having an edge on this crisis. What do you see that their edge is, and how do you see them coming out on that back end of this?
Well, I think it's just in many respects an advantage, right? Because less people, and so also you can be a lot more personal, right? You can actually create an experience around and what people want or what they need or what they are most concerned about. In this case, if it's health, I think they can respond more quickly to that. Also, I think that the smaller hotels can also cater to a much more focused class of people who want something different and unique, and not have to be ubiquitous all over, but really cater to a really personal experience. At the end of the day, it's still about kind of how you gain something different by creating a curated experience. So I think the hotels can be, the smaller ones are a little more flexible to do it because they have less of the operations to deal with, and yet they can actually be more personal with their guests. So I think they do have somewhat of an advantage. I also think that there's an opportunity for these smaller hotels to really be more community focused and engage with the communities, to bring them in and use that as a vehicle to kind of create a sense of belonging in a community. And I think the smaller hotels feel more intimate. They're part of a home extension of someone's home, to go there. It's my place to be. I want to go. I'm going to hang out. And I think that has to come back and come alive. And I think the smaller hotels have a better sense of that, but better than the big ones, And I do think that there may be a focus, a different shift, because who knows what's going to happen with the convention business moving forward as we kind of learn how we might want to meet differently and what the demands might be slightly different. But I think there will always be a demand for a very curated, small, specialized type of hotel.
Andrew, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, no, a couple of thoughts there. I mean, we've been studying a lot of these exterior corridor motel products, and which we've seen really successfully rejuvenated into really interesting boutique properties over the last couple of years. And I'm wondering, in terms of opportunities, as we move out of this crisis, acquisition and conversion of those kind of properties, which are often in really great locations, may be something to take a look at. Exterior corridors may become terribly popular. And certainly these smaller properties where there are much less surfaces and things to touch and move around, and that tied into a conversation that we all had recently too about elevators and vertical transportation, for example. I mean, in these large high-rise buildings, how comfortable are people getting into elevators with other people?
Exactly.
They're not comfortable, I can tell you right now.
Well, at one point that exterior corridor used to be a safety issue, but now it's a different kind of safety issue to be looked
exactly,
at.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly, right. Exactly,
this is where the innovation and the shift in thinking comes when we hit certain moments in time like this.
Yes.
And you kind of touched on one of that. What do you think? Tom talked a little bit about the safe zones and things of that nature, but what do you think is going to create comfort for people to go back to hotels? Given the fact that they tell us to now wear masks in LA, wipe everything down the minute you touch it, even your envelopes, your mail, what's going to give people that comfort? How are we going to be able to do that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's about demonstrating what the hotels are doing there, looking after the health and welfare of its guests. And I think a lot of it is messaging, and I think a lot of it is how they're relaying that message to their guests. How many times they change their rooms, and and what air filtration system that they've used, and what are the products that have changed that are giving people a comfort that they are safe. So I think this perceived notion that cleanliness is of the utmost important, and I think that's going to help people get their trust and confidence back, and really to gain the client, the guest loyalty. I mean, right now it's about how do you get that loyalty back, right? what is it going to take? And I think having them feel comfortable that, but their the linens that they are freshly clean. Maybe they're wrapped or something, and they're changing in front of you, or things like that really demonstrate in real time that it is safe. And also, how do we demonstrate the things that people don't see, that are behind the scenes, and how can we convince them that the staff and the housekeeping and what they're doing is of the most important in terms of health. So I think if we start to embody that into a message and demonstrate that thoroughly, I think that'll help people feel more comfortable and get trust back into the places that will be.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, clearly we know that travel is in our DNA. And so when the time is right, people will absolutely want to get out and about and travel again and reconnect. And maybe that will result in smaller or more local or more regional trips versus heading off to Europe or elsewhere. We may well start to see a lot more staycations as people gently start to regain their confidence in the travel and tourism sector. But, for right now, I think it's really a lot about fear and anxiety. Right. And people are going to be a lot more cautious. And so we're going to need them, as Tom said, to convince them that it's going to be okay and safe to travel. And I think that this may well be one of the challenges for the boutique and independent players going forward, because it is my sense that in these times, people will more likely find safe haven in the large global brands that can carefully articulate their cleanliness standards, their cleaning specifications and protocols, and give it a good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will, which will be a more difficult message to be communicated from the boutique and independent sectors. And so I think that's a challenge, and I think that's something that we all in this sector really need to start thinking about today. And we've seen this in previous crises where people really turn to big brands in these kind of situations, and brand loyalty will come to the fore. And I think we're also going to see a heck of a lot of redemptions, from the loyalty programs and points. And so I think, our thesis is that, brand loyalty increases as uncertainty rises. And so that is an interesting conundrum for the boutique sector that I think we really need to think through. Now, on the bright side, there may well also be a shift to more of this concept of shopping locally and more environmentally friendly approaches, which is certainly at the forefront in the boutique sector. But I think there's a challenge there. And I think the big brands will have a much better ability to communicate that message to the customers as well.
And that alleviates and addresses some of the fears. But I'm gonna touch on something I've been seeing and see how this really parlays into boutique. Some of the things that you've been seeing on social media and newscasts is this ability for people to really tap into their creativity side and work with less is more. And I think the boutiques lead in a lot of ways, some of these new ways of doing things. Just this morning, I saw a couple that could not go on their honeymoon to Paris. So they designed an entire mural on a wall of Paris and took pictures. There was another one where they had artists and everybody interpreted the great art. Do you see design opportunities coming out of this in some way? The creativity that we've seen in engaging people in this situation has been pretty remarkable. Where do you see that potentially leading to as we come out of this?
Well, I think that begs the question about what's a digital interface, right? Because you're talking about virtual technology and what that's going to change. And, we are seeing maybe virtual vacations and virtual, those kinds of things. But I think it's about how we're going to embrace, maybe it's artificial intelligence. Maybe we're going to see those robots come back that we didn't want to see, delivering our food. But I do think that there is going to be a lot more emphasis on the digital interface as we move forward, and even more dependency on our mobile devices and so forth. But I do think that there might be opportunities to create amenities or entertainment spaces based on digital platforms, because that way you can actually engage and collaborate without having actually to touch people, but there's a way that you can do digitally interface, and maybe there's some creative platforms that allow us to engage in a more digital. I mean, we're doing it now, right? We're actually digitally engaged now, and we're kind of socially kind of responding, albeit we're not touching each other. But if you can combine that, with some exciting digital kind of interface, I think there's something very creative that can come about, about that.
Right, and I would come at that too from a slightly different angle, perhaps from the architecture and design professional perspective. I mean, how are we going to do our design work going forward? I mean, there's this migration to much more efficient digital processes, and we're starting to see virtual model rooms, digital review and approval processes clearly at the major brands. Many of the design personnel sadly are on furlough, and so we're trying to figure out all sorts of workarounds in the process that we have to keep these projects moving forward. So I think there's going to be a lot more creativity in the process of design as we move forward. And I think operationally, I think robots are a pretty good solution in some situations, particularly, robotic cleaning to sanitize rooms in public areas. Germ zapping robots that we see in hospitals may well become part of the regular hospitality environments as well. Disinfecting remote controls for TVs and other things, and sanitizing them and putting them in plastic bags for when the guests arrive in the guest room. So I think, there's a lot of creativity, Amy, that's going to come from the design world and creating experiences for guests, from the operational world of how do we deliver these services and experience to guests in hotels. But from our world as practitioners in the architecture and design community, how are we going to do our work differently going forward as well becomes a big issue.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to key on that, Andrew. I think there's some positive that comes out of kind of this situation by all of us being connected virtually, and how it's changing our design process. And what we're learning is that we're doing it, right? We actually are doing it. We are finding that we are moving seamlessly because of the digital interface of our systems now, that we're actually able to meet, we're actually able to deliver, and we're actually able to meet with our clients without having to travel across the country to meet with them, because we can. So there may be instances now where we might even be more efficient about how we do our work. And we're using things like material banks, right? So getting that whole material bank thing, which is really cool. We can go to this big warehouse and pick up materials that gets delivered to you the next day. So we're finding solutions on how to deal and work processes differently. That's really going to improve our process to be more efficient. And God knows we need to be more efficient on our design process, right? Because it's a very time-consuming and personalized business. So anyway, we can find a way to make it shorter for us, a time point. I think you all agree we can learn from this, and I think there's a lot of learning going on, and I'm really excited to see how we're going to be working differently. The other thing that we're finding is that we can actually work in every different, and we do this anyway as a global company, be connected with ourselves, with our clients globally, working together in a seamless platform. And I think it's proving more and more that we can do it easier and easier. I mean, I used to have meetings in the office, and the meetings would start at 10, and people show, not show. 10 o'clock, everybody's on the call. The attendance is the more it's ever been. I mean, can you believe that? I mean, what is going on here? We actually have people on meetings, and it's actually a delight to see that it's really causing us to really be actually more interactive and more connected than we were before. So I think there's something really positive to say about how we do our work together in the future.
I hope the balance is struck, because there is something still about design that requires touch, feel, community. And you could do so much of that digitally, and that does streamline processes, but there's still, name me one client that can't not touch the fabric or touch the wood. There's still that component that will never go away. And it's how we adapt to that.
Yeah, without question, Amy. I'm not saying that's the order to be on, because certainly we don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, but we've certainly gotten better.
But it's amazing to me how surprisingly well this transition from in-office to remote has gone.
Yes. It's
and then to your point, Tom, I find that in many ways we're operating a lot more efficiently. We have these incredible collaboration tools, which I have, created this surge in a level of connectedness. And so as we continue to streamline our workflow and our processes and hopefully increase our collaboration and productivity, there'll be some interesting outgrowth of this when we return to our typical work environment. So what we've been focusing on now that we've been at it for a couple of weeks is starting to refine that and revisiting email protocols, so we're trying not to inundate people's inboxes with emails, pick up the phone. It's okay to talk in that way, the old fashioned way, keeping our messages succinct, front loading action items in emails, clear subject lines, turning off ringers during calls, all that chirping and beeping, activating the mute function. So there's all of these things that we're now focusing on. But I think it's going to be really great for us in the long run. And I would tell you too. I mean, I personally, have a much different attitude to the concept of working from home. I mean, traditionally, I think a lot of people thought that working from home meant, playing with your puppies, watching soap operas, and hanging out with your kids. And now we realize that there's incredible efficiency in working from home, and also able to save people hours and hours and hours, particularly in LA, for these incredible commutes that people have, right? All of this time that people are spending in situations which are really not productive, it makes their lives a lot more pleasurable and hopefully more productive as well.
Well, we have seen the traffic gone down and the sky is a bit clearer these days.
I bet. And the canals in Venice have never been cleaner.
Right? We can see fish.
Right.
I just saw a chat come back, and I'm going to spin that because both of you touched on some points that were interesting. We are getting better at collaborating. We've all worked worldwide. I'm sure a bunch of our participants have as well. So we know, and we've touched on this digital life. Here's an interesting concept. The question that came in was, how do you see the public spaces evolving? And then I want to bridge that. Do you see an opportunity for hotels to be co-working spaces? Do they then compete with the WeWorks? Because if we can now work more remotely, do we need as much office lease space? Now, I don't want to get into the office space so much because we're really here about hotels, but is there an opportunity in hotels to be more club-like co-working spaces, because now we can reduce our overhead and look at different models?
Well, I think we're already seeing that. I mean, the hotels, we're named the third place, the third working place, because it was already happening. So I think it maybe is going to be more the forefront now. And again, I think if it has all the services and all the digital connections and all of the same types of services that you can have in a work environment, I do see the hotel as being a place for that, because I think, moving forward, I think the hotel companies are not only about co-working, but about what are the auxiliary uses that it can be in addition to serving a hotel room for guest stays and for social functions. Because, this is one situation of a crisis, of a pandemic, where we're seeing hotels turning into, hotels turning into hospitals, or turning into places to house those that need it. And it's a much different type of perception. So it's not only co-working that I think we need to look at, but how can hotels be more flexible in other types of uses as we go through different types of cycles, so they can adapt and they can move. Working is one. And of course, the notion of working is going to be completely different now as well. And our workplace group is really looking at what does that mean for space. And it may mean that we used to have a lot of free addressing, and there's a lot of concern with that because of somebody else's workplace and all that, and moving around. And so I do think that will have an impact on kind of how people work and what their workplace looks like. But I also think there is an opportunity for hotels to rethink kind of what the model is, to be more flexible, to be more adaptable, and to be more responsive to things that maybe we're not aware of that may come down the line. This pandemic being one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, actually one of our attendees noted that the Eaton Hotel in DC, I've been there, it does have dedicated co-working space as well. And we've made public spaces social engaging. I guess I was expanding on that in that respect. Right. Andrew, I didn't know if you had any additional thoughts as well.
No, I agree with everything that Tom said. We, for the last several years, have been basically incorporating co-working elements into a lot of our hospitality design projects. And we'll see what that actually means going forward, or what adjustments might need to be made for that. Secondly, I think this, for new properties, or, retrofitting existing properties, maybe smaller and more flexible meeting facilities are really one of the things that we're going to be looking at. And then, again, it's all kind of conjecture. And I maybe toss this one back to the team at BLLA. I think when the time is right and as the dust settles, we've really got to start to talk directly to the end users, really understand what guests are thinking about. We can all sit here and hypothesize, but ultimately, these are the people that are making the decisions about how they want to live, work, play, eat, drink, etc. in hotels and meet. And if there's a forum, Fran and Ariella, ultimately the BLLA and others can set up where we can start to engage directly with end users and consumers to really understand what their changing preferences and thoughts are. I think will be extremely valuable.
Good point. We talk about different design strategies. We've talked about a lot of that, the event space, the co-working space. What do you think is going to be addressed in terms of regulations? Tom, you touched on that a little bit earlier with materiality and stuff. Do you see innovation in the manufacturing side for different regulations of products? Do you think it's going to be, what types of regulations do you think, if any, would come out of this?
Well, one that comes to mind is air filtration, right? I think that's one that seems to come to mind because of the notion of how air and how particles get transferred to air. So I think we're going to see that coming out. I think we've already seen a move in terms of kind of environmental issues with how we're dealing with VOCs and those types of materials. So I think we're going to probably see a little bit more upswing on those surfaces that really are going to mitigate contaminants and reducing airborne or surfaces that can resist that kinds of things. So I do think that is going to be something in the forefront. I also think, as I mentioned, in terms of the social distancing, the occupancy per space, I think we're probably going to see some code changes on regulations on how many people should be in the space. To your point, Andrew, about maybe we're going to see meeting spaces smaller and occupancies a lot less. So I do think that is going to be a driver of code regulations. I mean, again, air changes, and maybe there's going to be a lot more yearn for open spaces and ventilation because, the bacteria doesn't like to be in stale spaces. They like to be, they want it out, they want to move. So open those windows, open those doors. Maybe there's going to be more balconies. So maybe there's going to be some more ideas or regulations regarding kind of operable windows, operable spaces, or access to outdoor for ventilation to kind of keep airflow moving. And those kinds of things that are going to mitigate some of these health concerns, and then also to address kind of the more high traffic areas, right? And so again, we mentioned corridors, we remember public spaces, though. I think we are going to see some rules around how public spaces are being used.
Vertical transportation is not going to be calculated on weight.
Yeah, and maybe we see those signs in restaurants which talk about maximum capacity for fire load, etc. Will have maximum capacity for social distancing purposes. One of the things that we were thinking about is that mean, Walmart is starting to take people's temperatures. All of us have,
Right.
as we've run around the world, and airports in different countries have had our temperatures taken multiple times. In Asia particularly, maybe that's something that's coming our way too, where a lot of our public buildings, including hotels, will be fitted out with that kind of technology to take people's temperatures as they come and go.
Yeah. The other thing, though, is that in the food industry and the restaurants, because all hotels have great restaurants or have restaurants and food F&B, so I think we might see those heat scars go away. Period. I think they're going to be gone. I think buffet's probably going to be gone. So I think and already there's been a lot of the health department in terms of how food is being served. So I certainly see we're going to see some code regulations on how food is being served, how it's being cleaned, how it's being delivered, and all that. So I think that's coming down the pike for sure in terms of regulations, because that's a big one. And as we all know, the restaurants are going through a big overhaul right now as well. And I think we're going to see some big changes in regulations on the food service side and how it's going to be served, how it's going to be prepared, and the like.
Yeah. I mean, all of this, is reaction to the environment that we're in currently, which, will end. And so once people get back to it, it'll be very interesting to see, what the regulatory environment is and the capacity to make those kind of changes, and again, how quickly people are going to adjust and feel comfortable and less anxious about getting out and about.
Yeah, that's true. We have a couple of lighting designers on our panel or attendee list, and they're mentioning UV systems like UV lighting.
Right.
That could also be a source of cleaning and different things. I think there is an opportunity for manufacturers to provide unique things and different ways of going about designing, which we haven't seen yet, which we will see. And I think that we're going to continue to innovate through this. Ultimately, the fear will go away and that we'll look at this differently, but I still think we'll apply some of the things that we've learned so it doesn't happen again, if there's an opportunity for that. Let's ask a little bit about, because I like your term, Andrew, hypothesizing. I mean, we're in the middle of a crisis that's really driven by a lot of unknowns. So having these discussions now will create new solutions in the future, but we don't necessarily have the immediate answers.
Right.
But what are we seeing now? Why we're in the heart of it, in the midst of it? How are hotels getting involved in this pandemic effort? We saw, and I'm bridging this a little bit about what we talked about yesterday. We see them as makeshift hospitals. We have a particular problem in LA with homeless, and some hotels are fearful of opening their doors to this. Some want to jump in. What is your take on what you're seeing with your clients? And Andrew, as a developer yourself, what are you doing? What are your hotels doing and participating in?
Well, sure. I can quickly comment on, from the development standpoint, a couple of the hotels that we're involved in the ownership and development teams in Chicago have been taken over by the city of Chicago, and they're providing accommodations for at-risk people and first responders, and they're located proximate to hospitals. So for healthcare workers that are working really long shifts that may not be able to go home because of fear of that they may actually test positive or not want to be around their family during this period because of the unknowns, or because they've been working really long shifts and don't have the time to go home or don't want to be on public transportation. So I think it's a really great thing. And then, so, we're in the hospitality business, and I think, a lot of these hotel owners and operators like us, we've opened our hearts and our hotels, and we're extending the hand of hospitality and doing whatever we can to help out during this incredibly difficult period. And I know that that's happening in hotels and other facilities all around the country. And I think that's really just one of the gorgeous things that we're seeing, is this incredible coming together and the sense that, we're all in this together and we're all going to get out of this together.
Right.
Yes, we are. Well said. Tom?
Yeah, what I think we talked about, there's some degree of social responsibility that we all have in terms of, take care of the people who are in our cities, and that does include the homeless. We do have a lot of it, I think, throughout the country, and particularly in LA, and I think it goes back to our mantra and all of our goals. It's really, how do we make our cities a better place to be, and how can we improve the lives of the people through what we do in our communities? So I do think it's on the forefront of kind of our minds. We are developing these prototype designs where we're taking modular housing and how we can actually build them quickly and provide temporary housing for the homeless, and finding sites throughout LA that we can build them quickly, and teaming with the government. I think there needs to be, with the homeless, there needs to be an alliance with our cities or mayors or our governments to embrace it. We can't do it alone without the city's input. I think there's a big push. I think now with this pandemic, it's causing us to really bridge the gap between public and private partnership. The hotels and the counties together, are working together. So I think that is a positive spin, and there is a focus, because let's face it, they're out in the streets. They could be carriers for all of us. So guys, let's take care of them, because we don't want them to kind of spread it, and they're out in the open so much, and they don't have access to all of the wherewithal that maybe many of us do in terms of food and access and a place to be isolated. They have their tents. So, we are seeing a movement towards transitioning rec centers to places for the homeless. And as we mentioned yesterday, some of them don't want to go in because they're fearing that they're even too close and enclosed rather than being outside. Yeah. So there's really a dilemma about that. But the point is that there is a movement to help, and I think that's all very positive. I think there's a movement to feed them. I think we're seeing a lot of that happening, where the restaurants and packaging food, and there's people chiming in to give them supplies and not only homeless, but people in need of supplies. And that's the way we're rallying around. And I think that's kind of the positive part. And I think what you said, Andrew, is it's about being kind, it's being open, it's about supporting each other. Yeah. And that's a positive state about humanity. And I'm so encouraged by that. And actually, in many ways, really inspired by it in many ways, because we will come out of it. And we will come out of it. It's a matter of when, and we got to bear the storm, and we got to do it together. And, we're going to get through it. If history tells us that, we're going to come out better than before. So, and cleaner, much cleaner than before. Much healthier than before.
Yeah, I would think that, as a community and as an industry, our social responsibility obligations are probably greater now than they ever have been, and right. and having those conversations is so incredibly important. We believe that the reality is a lot of these hotels that are.
Oh, did we lose Andrew?
Oh, we lost you, Andrew. Oh
no, Andrew.
Hello.
Oh, you're back.
You're frozen there from you went.
No, I was just saying that a lot of these hotels that have been shuttered and are now closed and not operating, the reality is, I believe not all of them will reopen. Mm-hmm. Not all of them are going to make it. And I know Governor Newsom in California is very, very focused on the issue of homelessness. This may well be an opportunity to have some of these facilities converted in ways that are appropriate for the less privileged people in our world. And the other thing we've been thinking a lot about with these closed hotels, the supplies that are embedded in these hotels. For example, I think there's millions of rolls of toilet tissue in hotels that are closed, along with all sorts of other things that if we could actually galvanize and figure out a way to distribute some of these things, it would absolutely make people's lives a lot easier. And these things are not doing any good to anybody in buildings that are closed.
Yeah, that's true.
I am scanning some of the questions that came in. We certainly can't get to all of them with timing, but I want to circle to one because we talked about this a bit yesterday, and Andrew, I believe you had an opinion on it. What do we see happening with people like Airbnb? Yeah, because the question is, as a result, will people want to even stay in private residences not knowing how they're properly cared for?
Look, I think, like everything, there will be new realities in every segment of our society. And in particular, the new sharing economy is going to look different, because I don't know about you, but I'm not up for getting into an Uber pool right now. And I think that some of these shared accommodation alternatives that are not susceptible to a lot of the regulatory efforts that the major players and hotels are subject to will likely be less popular, and they're going to have to rethink that offering going forward.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. I think we're okay on time. We probably have about 5 minutes left. I want to read one of the chats that came in. It's hard to keep up with all these. So like Ariella said, that we will take these questions on board for everybody who's thrown a question in that we haven't addressed, either by the questions that we already previously outlined. But this is an interesting one, and I think it's a good point. It kind of touches on the fact that we're hypothesizing right now.
Right.
The science suggests that the population will be immune to the coronavirus from the past exposure or vaccination within the next 12 to 18 months. A lot of what we're talking about in planning and design changes seem to be only relevant for the next 12 to 18 months. What is the discussion and the impression that we see in permanent changes going forward? In that respect, do you see something that we have to deal with today? And does that really look the same 18 months from now?
You know, thank God if we find a cure for this within that time, and hopefully sooner, right?
Right.
I do think it will help alleviate some of the fear, but I also think there's probably still going to be a doubt of what's next, because we thought we were done with SARS, and look what happened. And so, you know, there may be something that is going to be coming on the ground. So I think it, although it may be temporary, my thought is that it's not temporary. It's here to stay. And some say that it's going to come back. So, and there'll be something else. So I think all the moves that we're hypothesizing right now I think are all positive moves to any space that we're talking about. I think we're really improving the quality of what people are most concerned about is their safety and their health and their welfare. And I think you can never go wrong by being concerned with people on that. So I don't see it as short term. I see it as both short term and a long term solution. I think that we don't know what's going to happen next, that we're going to have to respond to, you know, so that it goes back to hotels being adaptable and flexible and how we use it in the future. But I see these all personally as positive moves forward.
Andrew,
yeah, no, nothing to add. I think, you know, Tom's right. And then we'll see how this evolves. I mean, there will certainly be short-term fixes as we're trying to figure out ways to make people feel less anxious and more comfortable about traveling and staying in hotels. And then we'll see which elements of that become law or regulation.
I'm looking at the clock, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, because regardless of working from home and the craziness, I know we're all very busy. But what I'd like to do is, we've talked about a lot of different subjects. There are quite a few questions that have come in. So our panelists will have some writing to do to get back to everybody with that, because we promised to do that. But I'd like to leave on a positive note, because, you know, we share a lot of fear, and I think regardless of what we do, we're all still a little bit anxious. And there are projects that haven't stopped. The world hasn't come to a complete end. So what would be your closing thoughts and your outlook for the future, or your wish, your desire, or what you really perceive is going to happen based on your current business?
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, Amy, I'm so optimistic about the future from that viewpoint. I mean, we've got projects that are under construction now. They are moving. They are happening. They are not stopped. Of course, these are the cities that have not been, you know, mandated to stop construction. So they are moving forward. We're also seeing our projects being maybe delayed or slowed down, but not stopped. So it is coming back. The other thing that we're seeing, and we have this global call every Monday morning with all the offices throughout the world. And I have to tell you, there is a lot of activity going on around the world right now. So there is developments happening, things are moving. I'm very encouraged on what's happening around the world. So be it, we are in the situation right now, but we're going to get out of it. And just the tenor of what I'm seeing now and what we're seeing now in the world in terms of kind of what's happening in terms of workflow, I think, and it's going to be very positive. I'm very optimistic, a positive outlook on it. And when those hotels open, they're going to be pent-up demand. They're going to be really active, and it's going to be great to have a drink there again. Once again, some cool rooftop bar 6 feet away from somebody, but we'll be drinking together and after a big hug, also.
Yeah.
I would certainly share Tom's optimism. From our perspective, I mean, we're certainly seeing some clients that are saying, hey, pump the brakes on projects. But we're also seeing others that are saying, hit the gas, baby, it's time to go. And a lot of people are looking at this as a great opportunity to do renovations because they believe they're going to displace way less business because the hotels are running incredibly low occupancies. And so it's also a great time to be doing planning. And the underlying sentiment, I think, from the developer community is they're going to be able to buy these projects out more efficiently from a construction and also from an FF&E, OS&E standpoint. So, people have different views on all of that, but the net is that there's a lot of business still going on, which, we're all so grateful for. And then, at the end of the day, when we think about our business and the businesses, I think of everybody that's listening in today, and the people in our company sometimes get sick of hearing me say this, but, our job is to make people feel great. If we make our team members feel great, if our clients feel great, our clients' guests feel great, then well done, mission accomplished, and everything kind of falls into place. And so we often quote Maya Angelou, and to paraphrase her, that people won't remember what you said or what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. And now's the time that we all need to just be reaching out, helping, sharing, doing, and making people feel great, because this will be behind us sometime soon.
Absolutely. Andrew, you always make us feel great. Tom, you as well. It's been such a delight. I've loved working with you guys for years. It's been great talking to you. I do see a light at the end of our tunnel. I think the community has come together in such a way that's so touching. I find myself getting teary-eyed every day because I always look for the good news on the news. And hang in there. We're all here together. And let's keep talking and supporting one another. And I know we will see the light at the end of the tunnel. We absolutely will. Thank you so much for all your time this morning. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We will indeed get all these questions answered. And it would be fair for me to say, I think Andrew, Tom, myself would be happy. If you want to email us or anything, we're happy to keep talking about this. And stay positive. We are in it together.
Yes, exactly. You said it very well, Amy. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Amy, for all of this. As Amy said, we are here for any questions that you have. We have recorded all the questions that you asked during the webinar. All of the panelists will be receiving these questions, and we will publish them on stay-boutique.com next week. Also, we are an association helping the world's boutique hotels. If you can, we would welcome you to become an official member to help us keep going. And also, don't forget to hashtag Boutique Strong and hashtag Save Boutique Hotels. This will bring awareness for a solid recovery and to train travelers in how they can support their favorite hotels in the world. So thank you, everyone. This is a collective effort, and we will get through this together as the boutique community of the world. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.